There we are. Kia ora koutou. It's so weird hearing someone talk about you when you're sitting there. But yeah, mōrena koutou e te whānau, no mai haere mai ki tēnei whare. Thank you for coming along this morning. I've put a lot of heart and a lot of thought into this. I think I've over-prepared. It's actually made me a bit nervous. I talk a lot. It's not normally a problem for me, so hopefully I can hold it all together. But yeah, this talk is going to be about mai mahi. Mahi is a Māori word for work. Mai mahi, how I think it relates to this theme of compassion, and how I think through art, design, and education we can try and change New Zealand and kind of reimagine a new New Zealand. So it would be rude, especially from a Māori perspective, not to introduce myself. So ko wai e tū nei, who stands here? Ki te taha toku pāpā on my father's side, ko ngā pui ahau, ko ngai tū te auru te hapu, ko ngā pui te iwi. So on my father's side, I whakapapatu ngā puhi and ngai tū te auru. Ki te taha toku whaia on my mother's side, no Wanganui ahau, ko tamaki te iwi, ko ngāti hinekura te hapu. So from my mother's side, I'm from Wanganui. I also have Scottish, English, and Samoan whakapapa. So there's a bit of a mix in there. I was born in Taumaranui. If you're from Auckland, you probably don't know where Taumaranui is. It's a small town in central North Island, not far from Taupo. So I was born there, I was raised in Gizzy, living pretty close to the beach, which is awesome. Studied in Wanganui, also at the university in Austria and in Nottingham. Lived in Wellington for a few years, but now I live here in Tamaki Makaurau. This is my home now. And I think of myself like this. I'm a bicultural, multiracial New Zealander. Ko Johnson Witehira tōku ingoa. This is who I am. And what I do is different to who I am, but they inform each other, I think. Art, design, and education. This is what I do. And it's really fun doing these things. And each of them allows me to do something very different. Those designers here, I think there's a few of you. Design is about solving problems, and I really love that. For me, art is about making problems. Something very different, but it lets me not have to service a client. And for education, I get to turn people into problems, so that's even more fun. Creating my own problems. But over the years, across these industries, I've been lucky enough to work on a huge range of projects with a lot of talented people. With many of the projects that I'm going to show you, I've been invited by so many talented people to work with them, and I'm always humbled to be asked. I'm like a kid in the playground. You know, when anyone comes to me like, do you want to work on this project? I'm like, oh my God, you're so cool. Yes, I do. yes, I do. What do I have to do? I'll do it. And pay me too, please. That would be really good. But I was going to just introduce you to some of these projects really quickly, this diverse range of projects, and then talk to you specifically just about one or two. This first one up here is an example of a Māori typeface that I designed, whakarare. This is a little nod to Ururoa Flavel, but this is an important whakatauki around not dying like an octopus, but fighting to the end. And with this typeface, I was interested in particular, how typography might be a place of tino rangatiratanga. And this big word might be loosely translated in te reo Pākehā as self-determination. You know, I thought, how might Māori take control of our own knowledges, our own written languages through typography? I've worked on a number of illustration projects over the last few years. This is just some example of some recent work for Auckland University Press, some different book covers. And obviously a range of art projects. This is some of the work that was shown in Times Square. Well, this is some slides from the more recent work that we were just talking about from Half-Blood. In this artwork, it's a playable artwork. You can play as a Māori figure arriving in Aotearoa, or in one version, in this version, you play as a missionary arriving in Aotearoa. And as you go through the artwork, you throw Bibles at these Māori figures, and this is the animation that happens. Not slowly like this, but the figures become docile, their clothing changes, they become a little bit lighter. And it's a very, I guess, blunt way of showing some of the things that happened with colonisation. With the Māori figure in this game, something just as weird happens, but I'll leave it to you to explore that. This is just another art project. For me, that was exploring. I developed these artworks around the time my grandfather had passed away, but I was also around the time I was having my son, the Kutawhiti, who you can hear kind of making noise out there. So that's him in the right there. But this references my grandfather, the Swanndri, who was a he was a farmer all his life in Taumaranui. But from art projects, I've also gone to work on products. And these are the Māori alphabet blocks. Again, this was one of those moments where, with Uncle Goose, when they first approached me, I thought, who the hell are these guys? They sent me a one-line email, would like to do some Māori blocks. And I thought, okay, it's an American company in Michigan. But after talking to the owner, Pete, they'd designed a set for a Cherokee Indian set. And not because they'd make money. They don't make money off these, I know that. But because he was really interested in the language over there, he could see it was falling away. This is the Indian Cherokee set. And with the Māori set, he just said he'd always been obsessed with New Zealand culture and music and things like that. So with Skyped, I met him, and he's a really cool guy, and that helped me come on board with this project. But also, they work with house industries. I was like, yes, if I can get one step closer to working with those guys, I might feel kind of cool as a designer. So there was that. Again, more recently, I've ended up working in theatre as well. With this, it was Hone Koko doing some lighting design and animated backgrounds. Education as well. Working with rangatahi, but also teaching at tertiary levels. More illustration, but this was also a mental health project, a Pacifica mental health project. So again, there's this huge range of things, of different creative projects. And there's something that links it all together, excuse me. And it's not that it all looks Māori. I'm not really sure what that even means. It's about tūmanako for me and all this work. It's about hope and not wanting to sound cheesy. But in all the design I do, it's about trying to imagine this New Zealand that doesn't exist yet, I think, and try and build something new. And for me, that normally starts with where do we change New Zealand? You know, where's a place for us to imagine and dream and think about this place and how it could be? And I think a really good place to start is education. And this is the first slide. This is how I normally introduce myself, these days anyway, to a class of students. I've got some older students up the front here who wouldn't have seen this, but after working with them and some other work at Unitec, I've kind of developed my methods, I guess, a little bit. But this is the first slide I put up. And in thinking about this theme of compassion, I thought, well, maybe this is one area where it connects to my work, with compassion being about, according to the dictionary, having sympathetic pity or concern for the misfortune of others, for things that you missed out on or that might have happened to you. And I think my students was like, what are you sorry for? We don't even know you. We haven't even met you. He's already apologising to us. But there are many reasons to be sorry. And it kind of starts with something like, sorry you had to get up so early to be here. I'm sure it's going to all be worth it. I'm sorry that you might have had to park far away this morning because the people living in that van have to live somewhere too. I'm sorry that you felt uncomfortable walking around that homeless person on K Road. I'm sorry that sometimes hearing Māori words or being around Māori makes you feel uncomfortable. It makes me feel uncomfortable too. Sometimes I don't feel Māori enough. In a room full of Pākehā designers, sometimes I feel like the only Māori on the planet. But that's because, you know, when you look at me, you don't see the Pākehā person. Racially, I'm probably more Pākehā than Māori. You see a Māori guy talking about design. But mostly I'm sorry that the treaty didn't work. I'm sorry that we all missed out on a biracial, on a bilingual education. And I'm really sorry that we all missed out on the beautiful things that I think would have happened in Aotearoa if the treaty really did work. And it's a genuine apology, you know, and I hope you forgive me, but I also hope that you forgive yourselves and forgive your ancestors. And when I say your, I mean our, because I'm Māori and Pākehā. You know, we can't undo the things that our ancestors have done to each other. You know, the land taken, the promises broken, and some of the dreams forgotten. But I think as designers, as artists, as whatever you do in here, it's your responsibility, and so again, it's your responsibility to imagine this type of New Zealand that hasn't yet happened. And for me, it's really important, especially with my son out there, Nuku Tāwhiti, Robert Duff Witehira, to try and create this world that I wanted to live in, but wasn't there. And I think it can be there, and I think it's up to us to try and do this. And for me, this started with, in education, it started with a project called the Aotearoa House. And with this, we brought together a number of students from a range of creative disciplines with one simple question, and that was, how might our homes look if they were designed from a biocultural perspective? And how might the things in our homes function, look, and feel, again, if they were designed from this bicultural Māori and Pākehā perspective? And I'd never done anything like this before, neither had any of my colleagues. We thought, hey, let's give it a go. Our boss didn't like us doing this and didn't want us to do it, so we had to do it on the down low. A project with about 40 students across 5 disciplines. And we did. And it was really exciting. This is one of the images that we showed the students when we kind of pitched the idea to them. We didn't say, this is what you're doing. We said, what do you think about this? We think this is quite important. In fact, we think it's really exciting. And this was a simple way of them trying to think about how we might design something like a lamp. Because even for me, I thought, well, Māori, you know, we don't, if you look into our design history, we don't have any lamps, you know, but we've got narratives around how Māori slowed the sun, around how he brought light to the world and fire. Just go back one. And this project here that you can see is an example of some of the work that one of these students produced, this lamp. So he took this Māori narrative of Māori slowing the sun, using these taura, or these ropes to slow the sun. So with this lamp here, as the light, it normally sits at the bottom, but as it's pulled, there are actually pulleys on the side. As it gets higher, it gets brighter. And the weights lock it down, almost like Maui with his ropes tying down the sun. And the most successful part of this project, I guess for me, was there were no kuru. And that was a big challenge for us. We didn't want people putting kuru on things. And there was one project and it had kind of kuru in it, and I kept saying, how's the kuru shelf going? And the student used to get so pissed off at me. It's like, well, it looks like a shelf of kuru. That's what it looked like. But there were no other projects like that. They all took Māori narrative and Māori stories to try and figure out how this might work. And these are just some other examples of some of the work. The student here was inspired by weaving and harakeke and aranya, so that's where this table was designed about. The two projects in the middle, the one in the middle, and the one on the bottom right, those were both inspired by the story of Rata, in which he goes into the forest to cut down a tree to make a waka, but he doesn't acknowledge Tāne Mahuta, this deity associated with the forest. So every time he comes back to the forest the next day, the tree is returned, and the birds and the insects have reconstructed this tree. So with this coat hanger, the actual elements that things hang off, the student tried to almost pull them out. That was her idea of the tree splintering. Whereas the student down here used exactly the same narrative in creating these vases, and that's why they almost look like these stumps of wood that have all been cut. And one thing I should add with these projects is that all the students, 95% of the students were Pākehā. Most of the some of the students were from overseas as well. I wasn't working with Māori students, just generic classes of design students. And I wasn't sure, none of us were sure how to make this work at the start, and we thought, let's just try and bring tikanga Māori into everything that we do, again, having never done this. So we put Māori words into all the briefs, student briefs, into all the timelines, but more importantly, we brought tikanga, kind of Māori ways of doing things, of seeing the world, into the classroom, and we tried to teach students about how to do that. We didn't say, these are the Māori things, this is what we're doing. What we did is we got the students to research that tikanga, to bring it back and to bring back their own tikanga, whether or not you're a Pākehā New Zealander, Māori, or an international student, the things that you think are culturally important to you and work in a classroom, and we negotiated those things. And then what we did in class is every time our class met for these large group sessions, the students hong at each other as we came in. We did karakia, a type of prayer or blessing, to open those sessions and to close them. It meant that when we were designing in that space and in that time, something special was happening. We had shared kai, as you can see here, and we had a lot of large open critiques. But this was the real success of the project if I took anything out of it. I think the students, as well as probably some of the staff, thought I was going to go there and teach them how to do Māori design. But I didn't teach them that at all. Even I was surprised, maybe feeling a little bit redundant, that I didn't need to. I really didn't need to teach them how to do Māori design. They already had a grasp of Pākehā design through studying design. But all we did in the space actually was enable them to engage with Te Ao Māori, to do things that are Māori in a way that felt safe, that felt positive. I remember even after the first classroom we did a karakia, because we all designed this project on the fly, to get it going. And at the end of the class we kind of shut everything down. That was really great. And one of the Pākehā students comes up to me and says, "Don't we need to do a karakia to close it?" And I said, "Yes, I haven't printed them out yet." So I wasn't prepared. But it told me that the students were already on board to take on some of these ideas. And from this classroom, this was about trying to design these things specifically. But after this, I thought, can I just do this in any class? Can't we just apply this in any class? So now with some of the graphic design teaching I do at AUT with my classes, I do the same processes here, regardless of what we're doing. We're not doing any special New Zealand or bicultural projects. We're doing mostly just graphic design, but it's graphic design in New Zealand, which I think makes it special. So we do all these processes. And I felt really nice the other day when we had a shared kai and someone else was in my classroom, and afterwards they said they were blown away because all the students were doing the karakia and the blessings and things. And again, I guess they'd never seen it happen at the school before. And I always think when I start doing this with students, like, what's this got to do with design? What's this got to do with education? What's Māori? What do these Māori things have to do with university? Why are they trying to put this in here? And it's got everything to do with university. It's got everything to do with our education in New Zealand. I think if we continue to pretend that these Māori things don't belong in here, we're going to just stay on the same track or the same route that derailed this treaty project in the first place. Beyond education, obviously I think real world projects is another place that we can start to make these changes, that you can start to make these changes. Obviously the bigger the project, the bigger the impact. And I thought I'd talk a little bit about some of the work I'm doing at Auckland International Airport and departures. So again, I don't know what I'm doing most of the time. I get invited to work on these projects, but it keeps working, which is really good. But with this project, I was invited to come on board as a designer to work with the iwi, the 3 local iwi out there, to come up with, it was, I think, a very challenging brief, to come up with bicultural elements that showed New Zealand's mixed heritage, that also helped grow the connection with the local iwi, so trying to express some of their narratives, but also trying to express Māori narratives in general, and also trying to express Pākehā narratives and what it means to be a New Zealander and a Pākehā New Zealander. So yeah, not that hard. But with most design projects, I just find like I design the solution into reality in a way. Again, that might sound cheesy, but that's what I do, especially when I'm stuck. I just start drawing, I just start trying to figure it out. With this project in particular though, it was about working with iwi, and I work with different iwi in a number of projects. And the one thing I think is interesting when you have to engage with iwi, you don't have to engage with iwi, you should engage with iwi, is that often it doesn't matter who the person is paying me, they're not my client, I find. It is the iwi, because if they're not happy, if mana whenua aren't happy with what I'm doing, then none of it works. Then it creates a bad relationship between the client, the person who's paying me, and mana whenua or the iwi they are engaged with anyway. And I think that's probably strange for some of my clients when they think I'm working for them and I think I'm working for them. It's kind of this different thing. But yeah, I've been working on a lot of design at the Auckland International Airport. They're doing a really big redevelopment of departures. And these are just an example of these columns that go through the security area, the part where you have to take off your bag and put on little conveyor belts. And I thought I'd show you this bit because I think it was an example of where kind of Māori and Pākehā ideas can come together. Originally, in this small part of the brief, they wanted the space, where we had Māori elements, they wanted them to be really quiet and a bit more low-key. And that's because it can be a stressful place, you know. Going through airports, often you're running there and you've got to fill out all these forms and you've got to get all the stuff out of your bag and you've got your liquids and all that sort of stuff. So it can be quite stressful, and they thought, can we do some low-key designs? And I said, well, if this is security, if this was any type of Māori structure, and we've all seen whare whakairo, you know, carved meeting houses or the pātaka storehouses, you can't miss the security. It's so obvious. And I said, we need to bring the security out and bring it to the forefront. And this was my way of trying to figure out how that security might look. They're just starting to put this into some of the development of it now. That's why there's guys all hanging out in there and working around it. But there are still 3 pillars, you can't see them. But what was nice is that these were, each of these I could talk to the 3 iwi about it. And the fact that Mataoho in Auckland, especially Manukau, and Mangere, this tupuna associated with volcanoes, volcanic activity and rocks and things, it just made sense to put it onto these concrete columns and to have this tupuna, this representation of Mataoho, this powerful volcanic deity, kind of here in this space. And these elements are going all through the airport. I don't need to show you them all, but here's another little piece that will be going to, right near the entry where you normally go through after you get those little forms that you have to put all the information on after you walk through. This would be the doorway that you walk through there. And above that is a pattern that's a mix of Pātaki, this kōwhaiwhai pattern, and also a tara, which appears a lot in a lot of my work. It's a female vagina. It appears in a lot of this work. And the reason it does is that in Māori carving and in Māori symbolism, the vagina is seen as the most powerful element because it's where we came from, and it's also where we die. And the narrative of when Maui tried to get immortality for mankind, it was through the legs of Hine Nui Te Po he had to go, and he was crushed when she woke up and realised what was happening. A lesson there for all men. Don't be doing that while women are sleeping. But it's this very powerful, very, very powerful element. But women also have this, because of that also, this power to remove tapu, to change our state in a way. And this is a critical transition. When you go through some of these kind of doorways and some of these paths, you're essentially leaving New Zealand, going into this kind of stateless kind of void in a way. So for me, it's really important to have these elements, these Māori elements, again, that hinted at these types of transitions, that hinted at Māori ways of acting and being in these spaces. But again, also doing it in a way that considers Māori and Pākehā narratives. This carved figure, it's hard to see in there a little bit, but his eyes are actually made out of compasses to acknowledge both our Māori and our Pākehā ancestors voyaging here across the seas. And there's actually a Southern Cross in there above his head and things like that too. So that's what most of this practice is for me. Again, it's about trying to reimagine New Zealand, reimagine Aotearoa. I don't think the project's finished, not even close. And particularly in our current political environment, I think we've got a lot of work to do. But that's my challenge, I guess, to you guys as creatives, as artists, as designers, is to try and bring this bicultural world to life, try and bring some Māori things into what you do, and try not to make a point of it. I think these Māori, even though we're bringing tikanga into the classroom, when I go and shake someone's hand, I don't think I'm doing a Pākehā thing, right? Because Māori didn't shake hands like that before. So when you try and do some of these Māori things, don't think, I'm doing this Māori thing. Don't try and make a point of it, just try and make it normal. I think that's the key to trying to realise a lot of this stuff in our lives. So nō reira, tēnā koutou, kia ora no tātou katoa. Thank you.